So if the issue of the Buthelezi brothers came with accused number 1, why is the Sangoma also talking about it? How is the Sangoma also talking about it? Because then the Sangoma is saying he cleansed the brothers that were in jail, according to Gininda. Guys, I'm still stuck at the point where a person is making a voluntary confession but still giving you wrong information. That's not the point. We're not referring to accused being in your car. We're referring to your team of investigators that you trusted so much that you allowed them to drive your accused in your case, where you're the lead investigating officer, to KZN, and yet today you come here and tell us that you don't know them. Gininda.
And I'm bad like the Barbie. I'm a doll, but I still wanna party. Pink felt like I'm ready to bend. I'm a 10, so I pull an next 10. Like Daddy, Stacy.
Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Nowazin Dombela, also known as Kwazi Bear on all social media platforms. Do subscribe, be a part of this family, and if you are a returning subscriber, welcome back, darling. Now, as you know, every week I bring you the weekly analysis on the Senzo Meyiwa case, and I'm here to do exactly that. So guys, please don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and comment down below with your thoughts on what is happening in Rata's court. So without wasting too much of your time, let us get into this week's proceedings. Long-awaited AVLs for all the vehicles that were involved in the arrest of both accused number 1 and number 2 in this case, Muzisbiya and Gininda. The day for the AVLs finally arrived, guys, and Baloyi gave us nothing. Baloyi gave us nothing, but are we really surprised? Basically, on Monday, when we continued with the proceedings, we were expecting Baloyi to provide us with the AVLs for all the vehicles that were involved in the arrest of both accused number 1, Muzisbiya, and Gininda, accused number 2. When Baloyi came in on Monday, he basically said that they had broken up the AVLs into 3 different categories. The first category being the AVLs for the SWAT unit. Now, as we all know, the SWAT unit was involved in the arrest of accused number 1, Muzisbiya, where he was arrested in Tembisa. Now, according to the version of all the police that were involved, none of the EMPD officers were there. They say it was just Mohola, Buthelezi, and Sadiki, if I'm not mistaken. But according to Muzi's version, there were a few cops that were there, several vehicles, several EMPD officers, some in uniform, some in normal clothes. So there were quite a few. So they requested the AVL for all these vehicles. And last week, Mr. Lissering, if I'm not mistaken, did confirm in court that all of their vehicles were fitted with AVL. To our surprise, on Monday, when Baloyi gave us the reports regarding the AVLs, none of the vehicles' AVLs were available. This is what Baloyi had to say about those vehicles. That amongst the vehicles that were allocated to the SWAT team was an Audi A3 with registration BZ35 MCGP, as well as a BMW 125i with registration FT33GRGP, as well as a Nissan double cab with registration CN71BVGP, as well as an Isuzu with registration JC72PV. Now, I was very surprised when these are the vehicles that were mentioned on the day, because I particularly remember that Ndanzi did mention that when he was arrested, there was a GTI that Lissering and Jonathan were using, and he was assaulted in this vehicle at some engine garage. We remember the version of accused number 2. But this vehicle was not even mentioned as part of the vehicles in the SWAT unit. The reason Baloyi gave us for the vehicle AVLs not being available is that there was a transfer in the service provider and there were some issues with the service provider. So basically, they were unable to retrieve previous data with regards to the AVLs of these vehicles. The second category that Baloyi was going to refer to was with regards to the crime intelligence unit, where he says that there was a Toyota Baki that was used by Mabena. Now, if you remember in my previous video, I did mention that accused number 2, Ndanzi, did say that he was transported in a Toyota Fortuner. Now, he may have mismatched the names of the particular vehicle, but it was a Toyota make, and it was confirmed by Gininda that actually it was a Toyota Hilux that was used by Mabena. The vehicle, the registration of this vehicle was BK23RRGP, and it was confirmed that unfortunately Mabena did pass away in this vehicle. So the car was involved in an accident, and all that Baloyi said about this is that they have provided basically an album just showing that the vehicle was involved in a car accident, and that is how Mabena did pass away. But the funny thing is, we requested AVLs. We don't care that the car was in an accident. We don't care that the car was in an accident because the accident doesn't take away AVL records. Common sense. Now, another interesting thing about this particular vehicle is it also was not fitted with AVL. Then the third category that he was going to mention was about Zungu, the constable's vehicle, which was a Polo, a red one that he used, that he said that he went to the Basotho hostel and was with the accused on the night of the incident. This, Baloyi says that they look for logbooks at the Tembisa police station, and unfortunately we're unable to retrieve the logbooks, for which also doesn't make sense because we don't want the logbooks, we want the AVLs, and that cannot be missing. So Mnisi, in response to this, information from the state does say that this is vital information for the defense of accused number one. So to just basically say that they looked and they didn't find it is not enough. They need to dig deeper, and they also need people to actually come and testify and give this evidence, because all Baloyi has been giving is statements or sworn statements by people saying that they looked but they never found anything. They want people to give evidence viva voce. Okay. They want the people to give the evidence in person so that they're able to cross-examine them and get the information from the source. And one of the things that Nisi does mention is that it's funny how the state is saying that all these AVLs are not available, because Lissering was asked in court about the vehicles being fitted, and he confirmed that the vehicles were fitted to the vehicle of Mabena that they're saying he was involved in the accident with. Nisi then asked, was the AVL also involved in an accident? Which is a really good question. Was the AVL also involved in an accident? Because AVL records have nothing to do with the accident. Them showing us pictures of the written off vehicle doesn't assist the case in any way. Ramsipili, in his response, also says that it's very unfortunate that these AVLs are not available, but also he does know, because he has worked several cases with the EMPD, that they did have contracts with Afrinet and Avis, so they would be the providers that would be able to basically give the AVL information. When Nxumalo was asked for his comments, he said he had no comment because both accused number 4 and 5 were not transported anywhere with these vehicles. But it's surprising because you should be asking for Zungu's records, because Zungu is the one that put all these accused in one place. So you should be bothered about the AVLs of Zungu. But Nxumalo just seems a bit lost in court on Monday. Among some of the vehicles that Muzisbia say were at the scene where he was arrested was a Nissan Qashqai, which he says was driven by a gentleman by the name of Nxamane. Now, for some reason, Gininda keeps denying this Nxamane, and that vehicle's AVLs is also requested, as well as a Ford Ranger that accused number 1 also says was involved when he was arrested. Now, they say that they will investigate and try and get those documents, but I can bet you 100 Rand that those documents will come back and they will say AVLs were not fitted in those vehicles too. Nisi continues with his cross-examination, where he basically goes through some questions with regards to the arrest of accused number 1, and also the process that Gininda followed when approaching the DPP, and what information he actually had available to him when approaching the DPP with regards to this case. Now, some of the very important things that Nisi touched on was with regards to the reason why Gininda actually requested for accused number 1 to come to him. And Nisi basically questions that Gininda held an interview. He held an interview with accused number one, yet he didn't bring any documentation. And also from the time in which accused number one was arrested, which was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Tembisa, Gininda said he had this interview with accused number one around 7, which gave him ample time to actually prepare the relevant documentation in order for him to interview him. Now, the funny thing about this little interaction is that Gininda was refusing to admit that he had an interview with accused number one. And Mnisi basically explains how an interview actually works, where the process followed is that you ask questions and a person answers. You ask questions and a person answers. And basically, this is what Gininda did with accused number one. So Mnisi is saying you had an interview with this person, you had ample time to prepare, yet still you didn't bring the relevant documentation to be able to jot down what he was saying to you before you actually moved him over to Colonel Mboto, who took the confession of accused number one. Now, some of the things that accused number one does state with regards to his interaction with Gininda is that when he was interacting with Gininda, he was near the police station in Vosloorus. And he does mention that there are some buildings around the area, municipal buildings, as well as a magistrate's court, as well as some other buildings surrounding the area. Now, Gininda denies this and says that the interview that he held with the accused was just outside the police station in the parking area. During the cross-examination of Brigadier Gininda, the judge does interject and say that Gininda doesn't agree with what Mnisi is saying with regards to an interview where the person asks questions and the other answers, and basically asks Gininda the warning statement, with regards to the warning statement, if it is to charge a person. And then Mnisi responds to the judge and says, this question is a question that should be posed to the jurist and not to this witness. And Judge Rata didn't take kindly to the suggestion that Mnisi actually made, and he even went as far as using the word yeses when engaging with Advocate Mnisi. Mnisi on Tuesday then goes through the version of accused number one, which we are very familiar with regards to how he was arrested. I will just touch on a few details that he did mention on the day. So firstly, he was arrested in Tembisa, and then from Tembisa he was taken to Vosloorus, where he then met with Gininda. And according to accused number one, he did not go to Ayrton. Now, if you remember very well from the testimony of accused number one in the trial within a trial, he blatantly denied ever going to Ayrton. He said that from Vosloorus they drove directly to Diepkloof, which is where he made his confession. And another thing that he points out is that Gininda didn't stay behind in this whole process. Gininda was with them in Vosloorus. He was with them in Diepkloof as well. When the confession was taken, or maybe not when the confession was taken, but he definitely had engagements with accused number one at the Diepkloof police station as well. He mentions all the vehicles that were involved and all the officers that he can remember that were involved in his arrest, including the EMPD officers, the likes of Jonathan, Monareng, Lisering, Sadiki, Mapumulo, and the works. Also rebuts the issue of having lots of people in the area. So Gininda had suggested that the area in which they interviewed accused number one in the police station in in Vosloorus, it's an open area and there's no way that a person can be assaulted without people actually seeing this little engagement. And the accused version is that firstly it was during COVID, lockdown level 5, and therefore there wasn't that much movement, but also the area in which they took him to wasn't just an open parking, it was a secluded area within the vicinity of the police station. Also does explain the version of being assaulted by all these officers, firstly in Vosloorus and yet again in Diepkloof, where Colonel Mboto was taking the confession, just before Colonel Mboto took his confession. An issue was raised on Tuesday by Advocate Mnisi that the interpreter was not interpreting the way that he should be interpreting, whereby he interprets both the question and the answer from the witness, but he has left the question out and not interpreted it for the accused, and interprets only when the answer is given by Gininda. So it doesn't give a full picture to the accused as to what's going on in court. And Jonas, being very dramatic, says this is how he's been interpreting all along, and the accused have not indicated that they had a problem. So the court then asked the accused if they require to listen to basically the proceedings and have them interpreted for them, and they say that it was not required for us to go back to the record and listen to the proceedings in order for them to get interpretation, but going forward they would appreciate it if he interpreted both the question and the answer that Gininda was giving. On Tuesday, Mnisi ended his cross-examination saying that he is a bit tired, so he would request that we continue with the proceedings on Wednesday. On Wednesday, cross-examination continued, and this is where Mnisi really touched on some important aspects with regards to accused number one's arrest, and some of them being very contradicting with regards to Buthelezi's evidence and what Gininda was telling us on Wednesday. So firstly, Gininda did tell us that when he was to meet with Muhola and Buthelezi at Phosphorus, he had asked Buthelezi who of the officers that he works with that wasn't involved in the arrest of accused number 3 that could assist in escorting accused number 1 to go and make his confession to Colonel Mboto in Deep Kloof. And he says that Buthelezi told him that Munareng wasn't a part of the arrest, and therefore he would be the person that would escort accused number 1 to Deep Kloof. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Gininda says that he called Buthelezi, and according to Buthelezi's evidence, he was never called by Gininda. In fact, he says that they arrested accused number 1 in Tembisa, and thereafter they then went to Phosphorus, and because they were going to Phosphorus, he then requested his team to join them because Phosphorus is not safe and what have you. So nowhere does he mention a conversation between himself and Gininda. In fact, he says that Muhola is the one that interacted with Gininda. That's a contradiction right there. Now, another interesting thing that I picked up during this moment is that Gininda is saying Munareng was never in Phosphorus. Now, according to Buthelezi, because Buthelezi said when they left Tembisa, he called his team for backup, that means that Munareng was a part of that team that went to Phosphorus, which means accused number 1's version is not so far off. Now, some of the things that Mnisi questioned on Wednesday as well was with regards to the officers that were assisting in both the confessions and the pointing outs for accused number 1, where he says that the fact that Gininda mentioned the case number to these people was a clear indication that these people were well aware that they were dealing with the Senzo Meyiwa case, because it is in Joburg. These officers work in Joburg. It was all over the news. So there's no way that they couldn't have known that they were going to be dealing in the Senzo Meyiwa case. Now, another thing that Mnisi touched on Wednesday was with regards to the pointing out. So he does say that the accused was booked out of Valeria police station at 8:01 in the morning, however, only reached Alberton for his pointing out at around 12 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, which is about 4 hours from the time that he left Valeria. So Mnisi's question was, are you aware that it does not take 4 hours to drive from Pretoria to Alberton? It's literally 72 kilometers. So it couldn't have taken that long for the officers to drive him with escorts to Alberton. And Gininda basically says, well, he doesn't know what could have happened on the way. Maybe they were delayed by the escorts or etc., but he doesn't know. And basically he cannot answer for that. But Mnisi's version, or accused number 1's version, says that he was taken to Phosphorus before he was taken to Alberton. And in Phosphorus, he was again assaulted so that he can go and do the pointing out, which makes sense if you take into consideration the 4-hour time lapse that it took to drive from Pretoria to Alberton. But now, since we don't have AVLs, that's another issue that we're dealing with in this case. Now, another very important thing that Mnisi touched on was with regards to the traveling that happened to KZN, where they needed to confirm accused number one's address or some issue like that, which was the day after the pointing out. Now, he does say that there was the same Ngamane gentleman who was involved in his arrest that actually came with them to KZN as well in the Qashqai. And Gininda says he doesn't know a Ngamane. It would be better if they could provide a name or a surname or whatever. And accused basically just says, there's no way that you don't know this person. He was part of the team that traveled with us to KZN. And Gininda says that, no, I didn't travel with the accused to KZN. I used my own car. That's not the point. We're not referring to accused being in your car. We're referring to your team of investigators that you trusted so much that you allowed them to drive your accused in your case, where you're the lead investigating officer, to KZN, and yet today you come here and tell us that you don't know them. Gininda. Now, the argument with regards to the place in which the accused was assaulted, as well as the place in which he actually met Gininda on two of the occasions, was a thing of argument basically on Wednesday. So Mnisi then suggested that we go do an inspection in loco, where basically all the accused are taken to that scene and the accused can literally point where he was assaulted. Baloyi didn't take too kindly to this because he suggests for security reasons that we rather use photos. And my chat is that photos are not as accurate as being physically at the location. Before court adjourned on Wednesday, there was a heated argument with Gininda and Mnisi, where Gininda felt that Mnisi was not being respectful to him, and he did address that issue, and he requested that the court decorum be kept. Now, the judge then had a long speech about basically the respect or lack of respect that has been going on in the court, and he does say that everyone should respect each other. And I'm just like, the judge is the last person really to be preaching respect, because he's the same person that does the sound to the defense. He does yeses. Just on Wednesday, he had been saying yeses to Mnisi when Mnisi was addressing him. Now, with the issue of the respect that was raised on Thursday when we began the proceedings, Ramasipili did address the court, and basically he says that respect is a very important thing, and from now on he won't refer to the accused as accused. He will refer to them as Mr. Sbiya, Mr. Ndanzi, Mr. Mncube, Mr. Mapisa, I even forget accused number 4, Mr. Mapisa and Mr. Ntuli. Then we continued with the proceedings of the day on Thursday, where the judge indicated that he had received a letter and he wanted to read the letter out in court. Now, he says that this letter was sent to him via his registrar, and he didn't seem too happy about that. He says that Advocate Mnisi should have communicated directly with him with regards to this request. Now, the letter read that Advocate Mnisi was requesting that on Monday he not be in court, or the court not sit, because he is going to be running the Comrades Marathon. Now, the judge didn't take too kindly to this, and he even says that there's no respect, and he even goes as far as saying black lawyers just do as they please, and so on and so forth. And just yesterday, we were speaking about respect, and here he is putting Mnisi on full blast. And one thing that really put me off about his behavior, particularly on Thursday, is that instead of addressing Mnisi as well, he asked all the people in court to comment on what they would have done if they were in the situation. Would they have sent the letter to the registrar and not engaged the judge directly? What would they have done? And he doesn't give the same courtesy to Mnisi. He literally pretended like Mnisi was not in court. And that, for me, says no respect. What I love about Mnisi's response to this is that he didn't even entertain the judge. He continued with his cross-examination. The judge made a ruling, if you call it a ruling, where he says that he will be here on Monday. What Mnisi is requesting is just unacceptable, because there's no way he's telling him that he's going to run the Comrades, and so therefore the court mustn't sit. So he says he will be here on Monday. If Mnisi is here or not, that's his problem. That on its own is showing a lack of respect for your fellow colleagues. That's just my opinion. Anyway, Mnisi continued with the cross-examination, and another interesting thing came up on Thursday where he spoke about Muzi's confession and how Muzi said that the gun that was used in Senzo's death was actually sold to Thobisi Sithole. Now, he says that this information as well was misleading because when they did their investigation, they found that it was actually Mdudeni Sithole. Guys, I'm still stuck at the point where a person is making a voluntary confession but still giving you wrong information. He even goes as far as saying Mthobisi, as we all know, is accused number 3, but he's not he's not Mthobisi Sithole, he's Mthobisi Mncube. So accused number 1 was basically trying to mislead them yet again. Now the highlights of the week, or one of the highlights of the week this week for me, was when Mnisi confirmed Gininda's knowledge of Colonel Mboto, where he says, no, I know him as a police officer, but I've never really worked with him. And then Mnisi says, you worked in Midlands, you worked in cases in Midlands, and Gininda does agree. And then he mentions a case from Midlands with a case number 26712 of 2013, where Mnisi says, you were part of the investigating team in this case. And Gininda says, well, it wasn't a single team, basically, but he was indeed part of the investigating team. Now, the interesting thing about this particular case, although Mnisi didn't go into the details of the case, is that in that case, the accused had a confession. And in this case, the person that took that confession is Colonel Mboto. Call it coincidence, but it's too good to be true. And you saying you've never worked with Mboto, and here he is doing a confession in a case that you did in 2014. Gininda. In his defense, he says, well, this was a multitask team, basically, and I didn't work directly with Mboto. Mboto worked with Ndlovu. Now, guys, you remember that there was a police officer that was supposed to testify in this case that died mysteriously. Mr. Ndlovu, that's the same Ndlovu that he's saying Colonel Mboto arranged for the confession way back in 2013. And then Ndlovu's wife was shot and killed after several investigations and certain things that I'm not going to mention here because I don't talk about things on the street, but it's too suspect. It's too suspect if you ask me. Now, before Mnisi completed his cross-examination on Thursday, he then went back to the issue of the warning statement, where he says he wants to read this warning statement onto the record, but he did not want to read the name of the person who deposed it. And he said that the reason why he doesn't want to read the name is for the person's integrity. So Mnisi was trying not to put this person under the bus, but the judge was like, you read everything. Because this has not been handed up, you read everything onto the record. So the name of Harold Stephanus Kruger came up, who is the person that wrote this particular statement, and he basically says that they had worked with several courts in their area, and it was said that the warning statements that they were using in their area were not compliant with section 35, right? They then provided a new warning statement that was to be used, and these police officers, Mr. Kruger and his crew, decided to compile their own using the one that was given to them. So Mnisi says he will be arguing this in detail in his arguments, but he did want to place it on record so that he can argue why is it that it was so wrong for them to actually even give this warning statement as a warning statement that is used when interacting with suspects. Mnisi then completed his cross-examination, and Baloyi began his re-examination, where he firstly just touched on the issues of the arrest of accused number 1 and basically the diary that Gininda has been referring to oh so much, and how he basically wrote everything that was on his diary. Now, during cross-examination on Thursday, Mnisi did cross-examine Gininda with regards to his diary, and one of the entries there was written next to the time of 1 o'clock, like 1300 hours, where he says that accused was arrested and this and this and this happened. And then there's an entry where he says that he spoke to the accused, and he basically says he spoke to him later on in the night. Now, the interesting thing about the re-examination by Baloyi is that he wants to now try and correct the diary entry. So Baloyi basically thought that when Nisi referred Gininda to the 1300 hours time, he was trying to show that Gininda had entered this entry at 1 o'clock. Therefore, Gininda was also there during the arrest, or something to that effect. But Nisi wasn't really focused on the time. He was more focused on the context of what was written in the diary. Now, when I say I had 2 moments of the week, this is the biggest moment of the week for me with regards to this case, because when Gininda continues to read with regards to what happened after Muzi did his pointing out, he says that he then directed them to a Sangoma who allegedly cleansed them when they had done the job. Now, this is what the diary entry reads. It says that Gininda interviewed a Sangoma who then confirmed that he had cleansed the Buthelezi brothers along with Moses B. Now, guys, all along Gininda has been saying that the issue of the Buthelezi brothers came with accused number 1. So if the issue of the Buthelezi brothers came with accused number 1, why is the Sangoma also talking about it? How is the Sangoma also talking about it? Because then the Sangoma is saying he cleansed the brothers that were in jail, according to Gininda, because Muzi misled them. But then if Muzi misled them about the Buthelezi brothers, what does that say about our Lionel Zwane? Naye, is he misleading us? Now, this is where I say initially this case was meant to be framed on the Buthelezi brothers. Now, this is my opinion. It's not what's been said in court. This is just me from my observation. They initially wanted to pin this murder on the Buthelezi brothers. When they found out that the Buthelezi brothers were actually in prison during the incident, then they had to look for another fallback person, which happened to be Ntanzi and the rest of the accused. That's my opinion. You can attack me on that, but I say what I said.
Then it says as 12th departure to Aroten. Then it says 1955, interview a witch doctor that is suspected of cleansing the killers of Senzo Meyiwa.
My apologies, my lord. I'm just asking the brigadier to read paragraph by paragraph because I can't see his handwriting.
Yeah.
Article lapho kentre kwalenge ngelanga nge-31 zakaMeyi ngomnyaka ka-2020 kukuthi ngemizuzu ewu-30 ngemuva kwehora laka-11 lapho ke tasemsebenzini ke lapho ke bese ngehora laka-12 nake wahamba khona njalo ke bese ngesikhathi saka-1955 ntambama wahamba wahlangana ke khona ke nesangoma ke lapho ke isangoma esageza ke abasolo mhlawumbe igebengu ade zibandakanye ke lecala leli.
The witch doctor by the name of Lionel Zwane confirmed that indeed he was approached by some boys of the Buthelezi surname, together with the one that was shown to him.
Athi lapho ke empeleni isangoma lesi ke sasenza isiqiniseko sokuthi nake salandwa ke abantu bemndeni okubuthelezi ke futhi behamba nomunye wesilisa ke kade bemtshengise nake ngesikhathi ade befika befuna ukugezwa la ke kuye
that a cleansing to be done. Thereafter, they came
for a job to be done.
Now, there's an issue that came up during the re-examination of the accused where Baloyi wanted to introduce new evidence. Now, guys, if the state really had a watertight case, would we still be entertaining new evidence at this point? Gininda is their last witness. They now want to bring in new photos of accused number 3 and 2 to lead in evidence. Like, really? So we ended the day on Thursday with that argument with regards to those photos, and basically the defense saying, hey, these photos were only brought to us 3 weeks ago, and we don't know what they intend to do with these photos. And the state say, no, but all 796 photos of the downloads of accused number 3 were given to the defense. Yes, all 793 were given to the defense, but you and the defense sat down and agreed that you only use certain pictures to form Exhibit S. Now all of a sudden you're bringing in new evidence. What is it going to change? What is it are you wanting to lead on these photos? That was the argument on Thursday. Then we adjourned for Friday. Today, which is Friday, the 6th of June, we continued with the issue of the photos that Baloyi wants to bring in. And basically, he did bring some arguments to support why he wants to bring in this new evidence. The defense literally opposed this application, and they said that if he does want to reintroduce or introduce these photos, he needs to complete his re-examination, then make a formal application to reopen his case where he can lead evidence with regards to these photos so that the defense can cross-examine, and then that will be it. Then Baloyi also raises the issue of the fact that he has been in communication with the ENCA, and they do require footage from the ENCA, and this is just my thoughts. There was a video from ENCA that showed Longwe Twala on the 27th of October, the day after the incident, and after Mgomezulu had put a version to say that Longwe Twala was shot in the foot as well. The state wants to bring this video basically as proof that Longwe was not shot. And my thing is, if you want to prove Longwe was not shot, bring Longwe. Don't bring us videos. Bring Mr. Twala himself, because who knows what shock could have done to his pain tolerance at the time. Shock, the adrenaline, you don't know what it could have done to him at that time, and maybe even meds and drugs, because we do know that Longwe has battled drug addiction. So don't bring us videos from the ENCA showing him the day after. Bring us Longwe, bring us a doctor that can confirm that he has never had an injury on his ankle, and we'll be more than happy to accept that. But that again is just my opinion. Those were the proceedings for the week, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you enjoy your weekend, and I will see you again next week. Bye.